So the last bill on the agenda will move separately. So Chair Markwart, you have House File 3669, the Omnibus tax bill. And so Chair Markwart, please move your bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. I'd like to move House File 3669 to be placed on the general register.
Very good, Chair Markwart. And you also have an author's amendment to get the bill in the shape you would like. Would you also like to move the A23 amendment?
Very good, Madam Chair and members. I would like to move the A23 amendment and members to the simplicity of a tax bill now, after all that you've heard. So,
Proceed, Chair Markwart.
So there are a number of basically technical provisions in the A23 amendment. View suggested by Department of Revenue technical. We've replaced a couple blank appropriations to zero. We changed one administrative one back to 2.5%. I see Representative Nash is gone right now. And then there's one that has a bit of a fiscal impact, is dealing with the Great Start child care credit and how we do the phase-in. Actually, it's about $300,000 to the good. So that is, and I see folks shaking their head on the finance area. So that is the amendment. I'd like, if members would approve, to get the bill into the shape I'd like to see it.
Very good. So we have the A23 in front of us. Any discussion to the A23 author's amendment? All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. So House File 3669 as amended is before us. So Chair Markwart, please continue with your presentation.
So, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This is a strong bipartisan bill that's going to make a real meaningful and prominent impact on the lives of our senior citizens and our families. And on top of that is going to propose the largest property tax cuts in over 20 years. On top of that, we also look at how we can help workers and small businesses that were most impacted by the pandemic. And we also addressed the workforce shortage needs and also affordable housing as some of the bigger areas in the bill. And before I go into more of the details, I'd like to offer some huge thanks. First of all, thank you to our nonpartisan, partisan staffs who have so much input in helping put something like this together. I want to thank the Tax Committee, and there are 6 members on the Ways and Means that also serves on the Tax Committee. It's an excellent committee, and this is a product of their of the efforts of the Tax Committee. And I also have Chair Joachim, who is also in the audience here, who was a leader on the property tax provisions in this bill and chaired the property tax division. So I mentioned this is a bipartisan bill. There's at least 24 GOP member provisions in the bill. That's at least one provision for the GOP every 11.33 pages in the bill. The target is $1.645 billion in this biennium. So I want to kind of break it up. So this bill says to families, young families, that we understand the joys you have with raising your children. We also understand the challenges you have where you're probably going to have the highest costs you ever will have in your life. Child care costs, student loan debt, mortgage or rent costs, property taxes. And so this bill makes significant cuts and enhancements to our young families. So let me just go over some of those provisions. The Great Start child care credit will provide up to a $3,000 child care credit for any from birth to the age of 4. You'll notice a number of the things in this tax bill enhances kind of a lot of these other bills you've heard along the way. And that will, like I said, provide up to $3,000 for one child, up to $6,000 for 2, and up to $7,500 credit for 3 or more children. We also raised the phase out from $55,000 to $125,000. This will get out to about 186,000 families. Something else we do is the student loan credit. We have tripled basically that, moving the maximum from $500 to a $1,400 credit for student loans. And we've also made the credit refundable instead of non-refundable. The third impact we have for families is a child tax credit rebate. So it's going to go out very similar to what Governor Walz is doing. These checks would go out this summer, early fall, as soon as possible. And what it would provide is a $325 rebate to every dependent under the age of 17. And that's about a $300 million cost. We also have upped the income levels for the K through 12 credit. So for senior citizens, we tell senior citizens that we understand that any costs we can cut for you is very important, but also just as important, we want to make sure that you can maintain your independence, which means staying in the home that you raised your family in, and now you have your grandchildren coming in for Christmas and so forth, and also make sure you've got a good healthcare system when you need that. So we do two primary things for senior citizens. One is we significantly cut the taxes on Social Security benefits. We say basically if you're married joint filer at $75,000 income or less, you will not pay a dime on your Social Security benefits. And if you're a single, it's $58,600. In reality, because of the way the formula works, it's about $85,000. So if you're a senior couple, each getting about $18,000 in Social Security, which is $36,000, you can actually have an additional almost $50,000 additional income on top of that, and all of your Social Security benefits will be tax-free. And that will benefit almost 250,000 senior citizens. That's $114 million a year and an average tax cut of about $470. The second thing that we'll get into are the huge property tax cuts for seniors that we'll get into. So for workers and small businesses who have suffered from the pandemic, we do the subtraction for the unemployment insurance like we did last year's bill. It's one time, subtraction up to $10,200 for both either federal and or state unemployment insurance. That'll get out to over 500,000 people. And then we have small business grants. So all of those grants and forgivable loans that businesses have gotten, there's been like 11 programs since the beginning of COVID-19. Those state and local dollars are actually taxable. And I've actually heard from a few businesses. We provide a subtraction for that, so that those dollars they received will not be taxable. That's about $20 million. And there's $50 million that would go to businesses most impacted. And then we also do the federal conformity, which is about $75 million of tax cuts for businesses. I want to talk about the property taxes and then give you a few examples. I'm sure many of you have heard about the huge spike in market values. Statewide, on residential properties, they're going up 19%. On ag land, 15%. On apartments, it's 10%. It's huge. This proposal we have in this tax bill will provide the biggest property tax cuts in over 20 years since the 2001 reform. And it's the right way to do it because it is direct dollars that go directly to property taxpayers, over $250 million permanent a year. The big way in which we do this is by moving the renter's refund to a renter's credit on the income tax form, as it was prior to 1981. Now, instead of having to wait 9 months, folks will be able to get that credit early on. That is about $150 million a year. And the other thing we do is, at that time, is you move from a household income for that to adjusted gross income. And the big thing on that is right now, seniors have to count their non-taxable Social Security. Let me give you one example. So you've got a couple that are bringing in $36,000 of Social Security. And let's say they earn $5,000 or $10,000 on top of that, doesn't matter. They are living primarily off their Social Security. They pay no taxes on their Social Security. So any bill that's going to exempt Social Security isn't going to help them one bit. But they now can exclude that $36,000 off their income for their renter's credit. So their income goes from $46,000 or whatever down to $10,000. That, on the average, is going to bring in a roughly $900 for those seniors living off Social Security, $900 of increased renter's credit aid. That is huge. And so this gets out to about 88,000 seniors. We know on our renters, those who get the renter's credit, 30% are seniors or those with disabilities, and in 14 rural counties in the state, it's 50% or more are seniors. We know that single-parent households, 46% of those are rentals. Other property tax items, we upped the homestead credit state refund, $36 million a year. Remember, these are direct. We have $50 million a year in school equalization, direct property tax aid. We also increased local government aid by $34 million a year, county program aid by $13,000. And one thing we're expanding, if you remember the agriculture, the ag to school credit, or on school bonds, we had upped that back in 2019. Well, initially it was put in the 2017 bill at 40%. We upped it to 70. This will take it in payable 24 from 70 up to 85%. It would make that permanent. There's some other things we do on housing and so forth, but I just want to close with a couple real life examples. So, you mentioned all the stuff in the bill, but how would it really impact? And I'm trying to take averages here. So you've got a family of 4. They've got one child who's 3 years old and let's say one who's 8. They make $125,000. They have a $425,000 home in Minnetonka. What are they going to qualify under our bill? They're going to get the $3,000 child care credit. They're going to get $650 on the one-time rebate. And they'll get $165 of increased refund on the homestead credit state refund. That's over $3,800. And that's not including, and by the way, that's a 54% income tax cut, just the $3,000. That's 54% income tax cut. And that's not including if they qualify for a student loan credit, which could go up to $1,400. That's really significant. I want to go to seniors. You got a couple married seniors, each of them getting about $18,000 on Social Security at $36,000. And they live in Edina in a $275,000 home. They are going to get all of their Social Security benefits are exempt. That's going to be $848 of cut. That's a 51% income tax cut. And on top of that, they're going to get about $101 in the homestead credit state refund, about a 3% cut on their property taxes. That's over $900. One other senior, let's go to a single senior with a $50,000 income, $18,000 in Social Security, pretty average, and is renting a one-bedroom apartment in Fergus Falls at $700 a month. All of their Social Security is going to be exempt. That's going to be about $367 cut, 28% on their income tax. Plus, they're going to get about $147 in an increase in their renter's credit. This bill is significant in what it produces for folks. And just to close, is that there's a real balance to this bill in that we're talking about $1.645 billion. But what it allows is that it allows for all of these other areas that you've heard prior to this bill, the huge investment, important investment in education or healthcare, childcare, public safety. It allows that to occur. And this bill really enhances and complements much of that. But the focus is on our families, and our seniors, on our workers, our small businesses. How can we make a real difference that are going to very positively impact people? So with that, Madam Chair, I know to kind of understand what's in this, I felt I had to go over a little detail. So thanks for your indulgence, Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you, Chair Markort. So we do have some pre-filed amendments, so we are going to move to those now. And Representative Garofalo, you're withdrawing your amendment, so we just have the one remaining amendment, which is the Sundin amendment. So we'll go to the A22-0435. So Representative Sundin, please move your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So move that amendment.
Great. So would you describe your amendment to, please, Representative Sundin?
Yes, thank you. The Madam Chair, the amendment addresses what I think is a misstep in previous tax code that allows for pretty much unlimited levy authority to fire districts, and it's caused some real concerns right in my own township and up in Carleton County, and this addresses the concerns of the citizens in Thompson Township, and I hope I can have support. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Markort, comments on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Sundin, for bringing that forward. And we've talked about this quite a bit, and I've said no before, and I respectfully will ask members to vote no on this, Representative Sundin. I just think we did create the fire districts last year, and at this point, I just don't want to carve one specific one out at this point. So I'd ask members to please vote no.
Thank you. Discussion to the amendment. Representative Miller.
Madam Chair, it's not to this amendment.
Okay, to the bill. Okay, great. Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. So we have no further amendments, so we'll move to discussion to the bill as amended. So Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Markort, just first, I want to say that I served on your committee for 2 years, and it not only has it been a pleasure, but I would recommend that any member, whether you're interested in taxes or not, should try to get on that committee at some point. It is so educational. You learn a significant part of, we kind of talk about in all these other committees, are in the end all affected by the taxes that we do or don't pay. And it really helped me understand not only our tax system, but how the rest of our state is reflected off of that. It took me 2 years, plus all this time going through this omnibus bill, to finally realize a question that I probably could have asked before, but I really want to know. And it has to do with the renter's credit and the skyrocketing property taxes. So if you could help me understand the math on this, or not the math, you'll understand. So the renters get their credit, and I assume it's the presumption is that because they live on the property, they're paying the property taxes, so they should get the credit. But I just realized that the property owners are still probably paying that skyrocketing property taxes that you're talking about, since it isn't really affecting the property tax that's being charged locally. It's just the people who are paying it. So I think you understand my question. Are the property owners still paying those skyrocketing property taxes?
Madam Chair, Representative Miller, yeah, that's a great question. They are, and that's why they need to pass it on to their renters. And so the assumption is in the state of Minnesota that 17% of the rent you pay is going towards property taxes. And so then at the end of the year, they have to get a certificate of rent paid from the apartment owner saying, you know, this is how much you paid in rent, and then they calculate 17%. But yes, I mean, right now on apartments, as I said, the values are going up about 10%. So that is just the value. Now, that doesn't equate, of course, into a property tax increase necessarily. That's determined by tax levies at the end. But whatever the increase might be, is assumed it would be passed on to the renter.
Representative Miller.
So just one more short question, just to clarify then. So the way the formula is written up is it's a direct pass on. So I'm going to keep the math simple. If on a property they're paying $50,000 in property taxes, the owners of the land, the tenants, based off of your formula, basically it passes through to that 50,000. It's an even match that passes through.
Chair Markort.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Miller, so if there was an increase of 50,000 property taxes and you had, 20 units or something, whatever that, probably not a good example, but whatever that would equate, an extra $500 per unit
Right.
would probably get passed into a monthly rental increase. I mean, that's the assumption that is being made. And the owner would be able to recoup through the increase in the rent, and the renter would be able to recoup through the property tax, or the renter's credit.
Okay, Madam Chair, just one final comment
Representative
on
Miller.
that. And this is probably stepping into years of tax policy in the state of Minnesota. But I would think that the direct passing on to the property owners would be a more accurate reflection of a property tax cut. I'm just concerned that this formula, the way it plays out and what I hear from property owners is that it makes sense, but I don't know that it's necessarily reflective of what's really going on. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Johnson.
Chair Schultz, Chair Markart, the question I have is similar to the issue on the property tax, changing it this way. You said if you use the example of a $500 increase per unit in an apartment complex. But we have cities now that have instituted maximum rent increases. The property tax could go up much higher than what's allowed for the rent to go up. In those circumstances, where would be an automatic going to the renter, although they did not pay the increase, how would that work when the actual owner of the property had to pay that increase, but the renters didn't have to pay their share of it?
Madam Chair and Representative
Markert.
Johnson, all I can answer to that is that the certificate of rent paid is only what was actually paid by the renter. So there had been questions that came up, like if you'd received renter's assistance, that would not qualify. It's only what they actually paid. And so how that would work out with the owner on, what was paid, that's all that this renter's refund or credit would reflect, is what actually was paid in cash or some other way by the renter. I don't know if that answered your question, Representative Johnson,
Further
but that,
question?
it depends on what the renter has paid in rent, and it's 17% of that.
Representative Johnson, anything more?
No, thank you.
Representative Gruffalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Marquardt, I just leaned over to my colleague, Representative O'Neill, and I said, man, Representative Marquardt is so smooth. The way he just glossed over that question there, I was like, well, yeah, the property owner's paying the property taxes, and we're still going to give the money to the renter. That's all I can really say about it. So that was good. Representative Marquardt, a similar question to what I asked Representative Liebling and Schultz earlier. Obviously, we have a history of having very few tax bills. Everything gets lumped together. If you could highlight one or two provisions that if you had the option of traveling by itself, what would you say would be those items that you think would be of the highest priority?
So,
Chair Markert.
thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Garofalo. So I don't really want to show my hand for, conference committee, so. But, one thing when you're putting a bill together like this, so I could say, a high priority, I'm going to say, right, is the renter's credit. That's a big priority. But to just do that, you're missing other areas on trying to create a balance, whether or not it's geographically or income or equity or whatever that might be. By just putting one bill out at a time, unless you knew they were all going to pass, you just kind of lose that balance, which is always when members look at things as a bill, they're looking at the balance. And so I wouldn't be able to give you any specific one just because I do think there has to be balance in these bills, which necessitates us to have several provisions. Would we have to have all of these? Could some of them run separately? Certainly they probably could, but to keep a balance, you'd have to have a certain amount of bills in an omnibus bill.
Representative Gruffalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Marquardt, on the spreadsheets that were put out, on line 2, it shows tax policy revenue. And it shows for the biennium what anticipated revenue is under House file, under your bill as amended. Can you or nonpartisan staff tell us what the the revenue numbers, not what the fiscal impact is on the general fund, but what the revenue numbers are without any changes, what the base numbers are. And the point I'm getting to is that in my eyes, there's a difference between tax reduction that is actually lowering the tax that people are paying in the government versus credits, set-asides, and I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but redistribution, where we do that. Do we know, can you or nonpartisan staff tell us what those baseline numbers are for fiscal year 22-23, as well as 24-25?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo. Ms. Templin, always to the rescue.
Ms. Templin, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, Cynthia Templin, House Fiscal Staff. If I could direct you to the spreadsheet on page 5. If I understand the question correctly, the question is what are the total current law general fund tax revenues in fiscal 22 and 23? And you can see on line 148 of the spreadsheet, as Representative Garofalo pointed out, there's $54,594,416,000. And the fiscal 22-23 biennium compared to the previous biennium, the growth in the general fund tax revenue is 14.3%. And moving further, that's just the current law increase in general fund revenues. With the changes in House File 3669 as amended, the general fund revenues, the growth compared to the previous biennium shows up on line 152 of the spreadsheet on page 5, and that is 11.27% in the fiscal 22-23 biennium.
Thank you, Ms. Templin. And I'll just remind members, we have like about a minute left before we're slated to be done. We can go a couple of minutes over if we think we can wrap up, otherwise we'll recess. So Representative Garofalo and Nash on the list, so we'll see if we can get it done in a couple minutes here. So Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Ms. Templin, I just want to make sure that I understand what that number means. So we're looking at line 151, and it's described as non-dedicated tax revenue plus House File 3669 total all change items. That is the tax revenue, and I don't want to use the term net because it's not, but that is the tax revenue. I can take that and subtract it from line 148, and that will actually tell me the amount of tax reductions that are taking place in this bill.
Ms. Templin.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, if I'm understanding your question correctly, yes, on line 148 of the spreadsheet, that shows the current law general fund tax revenues. On line 151 of the spreadsheet, that shows the current law general fund tax revenues with the general fund changes in tax revenues from the bill. And if you subtracted line 148 from line 152, you would get a total change in tax revenues of the amount that is on line 6 of the spreadsheet of $1,477,230,000.
Madam Chair, Ms.
Representative
Templin
Garofalo.
and Representative Marquardt, obviously, my definition of tax relief, Representative Marquardt would say that tax credits, additional local government aid, those are all forms of tax relief. I'm saying from the revenue side of things, money that's going into the government mixing bowl, that's what I'm looking at. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Templin, as always, thank you. And thank you, Representative Marquardt.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Marquardt, Chair Marquardt. We had talked about taxes being able to be spread to renters through all of that effort. But isn't it true that in a rent-controlled area that that's not possible? You know, we've got several cities that have now voted for rent control, and that precludes the building owner from being able to do that. Isn't that correct?
Chair Marquardt.
Madam Chair and Representative Nash, I don't know for sure enough about the rent control, quite honestly.
Once again, Chair Marquardt being very
Nash.
smooth. Well, members, it's true. If there's a tax that gets spread to other renters in other places, that's because they don't have rent control. But in a rent control area, that's not possible. So I find that very unfortunate. Once again, rent control is a dangerous area. I think that many on my side would agree with that, but just wanted to make sure that we put that on the record because we were talking about rent and taxes being able to be passed along to renters. With rent control, not possible. Thank you.
Seeing that there's no more discussion, I'll go back to Chair Markwart for a closing last word.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. Just one clarification, when I'm talking about the 17% of the taxes, that is what the property taxes are. They still have to go through a formula, so it's not a direct payment. They have a co-pay and a threshold and so forth. But members, this is, like I said, a very good, strong, bipartisan bill that are really going to help folks around the state. So appreciate your indulgence today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Markwart, for all of your work. Great presentation and a great bill. And so we have the Markwart motion before us that House File 3669 as amended be recommended for placement on the general register, and that nonpartisan staff be directed to make any technical corrections and amend the title. So Ms. Anna, please take the roll.
Chair Moran. Aye. Moran, aye. Vice Chair Olson.
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Garofalo.
Garofalo, no.
Garofalo, no. Representative Albright.
No.
Albright, no. Representative Becker Finn.
Aye.
Becker Finn, aye. Representative Bernardi. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Eklund, aye. Representative Hansen.
Aye.
Hansen, aye. Representative Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Representative Hertas, excused. Representative Hornstein.
Ornstein, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Johnson.
Johnson, no.
Johnson, no. Representative Kresha.
Kresha, no.
Kresha, no. Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Mariani.
Ariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Representative Markwart.
Aye.
Markwart, aye. Representative Miller.
No.
Miller, no. Representative Nash.
Nash, no.
Nash, no. Representative Nelson.
Nelson, aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Noor.
No, aye.
Noor, aye. Representative O'Neill. O'Neill, no. O'Neill, no. Representative Pulowski. Representative Petersburg.
No.
Representative Petersburg, no. Representative Pinto.
Aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Schumacher.
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Representative Schultz.
Aye.
Schultz, aye. Representative Scott.
No.
Scott, no. Representative Sundin.
Sundin, aye.
Sundin, aye. Representative Bernardi. And Representative Pulowski.
Pulaski's excused.
Pulowski, excuse. Madam Chair, that is 16 ayes and 10 nays.
On a vote of 16 ayes and 10 nays, the motion prevails and House File 3669 as amended is on to the floor.